master's in education, social research, and domestic violence consulting. She has a master's in English literature, as well as a teaching credential and the 40-hour California State certification in domestic violence training. She is also a published author of a fantasy novel about child abuse, Prisoners Under Glass. Ruth previously worked at Stanford Center for Research and Disease Prevention, interviewing physicians and therapists to create a curriculum designed to prevent eating disorders in adolescent girls. She then taught the curriculum in the Santa Clara and San Jose school districts. She discovered that some students had difficulty concentrating in class, not because they had ADD or ADHD, but because of the trauma they were experiencing at home as a result of being exposed to domestic violence. She has also uncovered a gap in domestic violence services in the northern part of Santa Clara County and in affluent communities in general. Ruth's teaching background heavily influences the Women's SB mission, which is to raise awareness in the general community about domestic violence in middle to upper income areas, to educate clients and providers about the impact of domestic violence on women and children, and to connect individual clients with resources to help them deal with affluent abusers more safely and effectively. Ladies, Ruth Patrick.
Well, I think that about sums it up. I don't think I have to say anything now, but let me add a few words to that introduction. Thanks so much for that. And thank you all for letting me come in and talk to you tonight. It's quite an honor to be here with you all. This is a difficult topic, but one I hope to shed some light on for you. So, Women of Means Escape Network, Silicon Valley, or Women for short, Women SB for short, is all about helping women who are in difficult situations where domestic violence is not supposed to happen. Everybody thinks that domestic violence happens in the other part of town, that if you got it together, if you're educated, you're professional, you're intelligent, you've got your life together, you're successful in your professional life, how could you not be successful in your private life? And that's what keeps a lot of women from acknowledging that domestic violence can happen to anyone. Doesn't matter what part of town you're in. Doesn't matter what your income level is. Doesn't matter what your profession is. Domestic violence can happen to anyone. So we offer a lot of resources through Women SB. We connect women with personal counseling, personal strategy planning in case they were interested in leaving their relationship but don't know how to do it safely. We connect them with therapists who are very knowledgeable about domestic violence. Do you know you can get your MFT or your PhD degree with only 15 hours of online training in domestic violence? So it's important to find a therapist who's very familiar with the tactics that abusers use and the impact that those tactics have on women. Otherwise, they risk being treated for anxiety or depression or those symptomatic conditions without really addressing what's going on underneath. So we already talked about my mission, or the mission of Women SB, which is to raise awareness about this issue. I also give trainings to professionals, to doctors, to therapists, to lawyers, to help educate them about this issue. And then I do direct client service. If you want to check out more about my program, you can go online and look at our website, Women SB. There's a video where several of the ladies that we've worked with tell their story and how Women SB has helped them. We're funded by the Los Altos Community Foundation, but we rely on grants from the community and philanthropic organizations. A lot of our work is volunteer-based. Our Hollywood film crew here, Ellie, is one of our fabulous volunteers, so we're very grateful for all the volunteers that help Women SB run. We take clients to court. We take them to police and attorney accompaniment. We run a helpline. We do a weekly support group. We offer ongoing support. We have a directory of resources full of providers who are knowledgeable about domestic violence, not just therapists, but also attorneys, because it's very important that they be savvy about domestic violence as well. And I'm very pleased and honored to report that we won the Outstanding Community Service Award last year from the Santa Clara County Psychological Association. So the most important part about that, exciting part about that is that a huge organization like the Santa Clara County Psychological Association is recognizing that this is an issue. It's kind of like back in the 1960s when nobody talked about the fact that Uncle Jack was an alcoholic. Now we can talk about alcoholism. We can go to Al-Anon. It's coming out of the closet more. And today, I think the issue of domestic violence in middle to upper income communities is kind of at that level. People dare not talk about it. We talk about it in hushed circles. And I'm so grateful to you all tonight for inviting me here and letting me talk to you about this issue. Because 1 in 4 women is a victim of domestic violence in their lifetime. 1 in 4. Globally, 1 in 3, and depending on the statistics you read, even 1 in 3 in the United States. Oh, we have some musical accompaniment. So with 1 in 4 women being a victim, chances are you either are or know someone who's been affected by this issue. You know, in some ways we've come a long way, baby. We get to smoke now, yay! But in other ways, maybe not so much. Just as I said, this is a hidden epidemic. If any of you are in college or have kids in college, it's a source of concern sending your kids off to college now. 1 in 5 college students will be a victim of domestic violence, will be raped or beaten during her time in her college experience. Every 9 seconds, a woman is beaten. And why is the focus of my program on women? Why are we called Women SB? Because 85, depending on the statistics you read, 85 to 95% of victims of domestic violence are female. Now that's not to say it doesn't happen to men. It can happen to men as well. And in some ways it strikes even more deeply at the core of their identity as a male to be attacked by a woman or by a gay male partner. It can happen in gay relationships too. But because the majority of victims of domestic violence are female, that's why that's the focus of our program. So when we think about a typical abuser, what's the image that comes to mind? The one on the left or the one on the right? This is a trick question. What's the guy wearing on the left, ladies?
White beater.
White beater, okay. But who's the real white beater? Will the real white beater please stand up? Sheriff Mercurini. Now, we're not going to say that he actually beat his wife, but he did cause a large bruise to erupt on her arm after holding her back, falsely imprisoning her and threatening her, and he was convicted of domestic violence. He was to be elected sheriff in San Francisco. And after that event with his wife, he had his badge removed, and he was put on probation and sent to a batterers intervention program for like nine months. But then guess what happened to him at the end of that 9 months? You know what they decided to do? Reinstate him. So now Sheriff Mercurini has been put in charge of the batterers intervention program. Now, is that ironic or what? We'll talk about that more a little later. But his wife, sometimes you can understand why a woman would recant. If you were married to a sheriff, if you were an immigrant, if you had a small child and were worried about losing custody of that child to a very powerful partner, what would you do? And when you call 911, who answers at the other line, at the end of the other line? Is it going to be a friend of your husband's, perchance? And so you can think how much more difficult it is even for women involved with partners who are in law enforcement. Who do you reach out to for help? We have this idea that domestic violence doesn't happen in the nicer parts of town. Or if it does, by chance, then she should have the resources, all the resources she needs. She has all the resources she needs to deal with it. But what a lot of people don't take into consideration is often she doesn't have access to those resources. And why? Because her partner has taken control of them. And sometimes, even if she's working outside the home, she's still having to turn that paycheck over to her husband, living like a prisoner in her own home. So this is Representative Lynn Woolsey. She's retired now, but she was the representative over in Marin, Sonoma counties, nice parts of our state. And when she created her first shelter, she said there were nights when there were no beds left. And I will tell you, in this part of the Bay Area, you try to get a bed for a woman on a Saturday night, impossible. I was actually interviewed by ABC News a couple of nights ago. I don't know if you're watching the 6 o'clock news, Channel 7. They were talking about Ray McDonald, the 49er who was arrested for a felony charge of domestic violence against his pregnant fiancée. Now, he's not been proven guilty yet, but he's been accused of domestic violence, and she does have bruises on her neck. She's 10 weeks pregnant and been attacked. That's a huge lethality risk. And so when I was interviewed, they were asking, I said, here's some meaning that can be made out of that, what happened out of this issue. What if the money that was going to be spent on Ray McDonald's salary, several $1 million, what if we took that money and devoted it to creating more shelter space for women so they have a place to go when they're fleeing their husband in the middle of the night, and their children do too. I have women who are living out of their cars. My program is based in Los Altos, where that's not supposed to happen, but I have women living out of their cars. So the fact is, domestic violence does know no boundaries. It knows no boundaries. It doesn't matter if you're in a 5,000 square foot house on a 10-acre estate or in a little tiny bedroom on the wrong side of the tracks. Pain is pain, suffering is suffering, and terror is terror. And the two hardest income brackets to escape from, the lowest, that's pretty obvious, right? But what may seem counterintuitive is the highest. So why? Because they have so much more money and power and influence at their disposal to make it hard for their women to leave. And the higher you are, the further you have to fall. So what are some of the reasons why women stay? Why is it so hard for her to leave? I had a lady in my support group for 6 months until she was ready to divulge to the rest of the group that she was a doctor. That was her profession. So ashamed was she that it had happened to someone, a professional like her. Many women are in denial. They think, oh, well, I'm not being beaten. It must not be abuse. There are many ways to kill a person. You can physically kill them, but you can crush their spirit. You can suck the life out of them, bit by bit. Criticism by criticism, insult by insult, threat by threat. And over time, those insults, those threats, those criticisms, they build up and they eat away at a woman's spirit. So education is a huge part of this. That's another reason why I'm so grateful to you all for having me here tonight, to get the word out. Will you all please go home and talk about this with your friends, with your colleagues. Get the word out so that women can feel comfortable reaching out for help. One of my ladies, I do a column for the Los Altos Town Crier, a local newspaper that Ellie is the photographer and journalist for as well. And in one of my columns, I talked about a case study. I combined a dozen different women into one character I called Sarah. And then I had a lady call me about 6 months later saying, guess what my name is? Sarah, you told my story. But it took me 6 months to get the courage to call you. I hid that newspaper under my mattress for 6 months. And now finally I'm reaching out to you. That's the kind of shame and terror and fear that possess women when they're trying to reach out for help. Because we don't have a lot of services in place to help women in middle to upper income areas. Mine is the only program of its kind in this area and in this state that deals with women in an upper income bracket and that is tailored to their needs, their stresses, their challenges. That's the lack of support, and we hope to provide more as the years go on. It's so important to think about the consequences of domestic violence. It affects women throughout the generations, and I'm so happy to see women represented. I bet there's women in their 20s. Are there women in their 20s here? Women in their 30s? Women in their 40s? Should we go on? Yes. 50s, 60s, 70s, okay, I'm in there somewhere. I'm not telling you where. But the thing is, ladies, if you look at some of the children on the playground, the activities of the kids on the playground, if you see some kids that are hanging back or having a hard time paying attention in school, some kids that are getting involved in bullying or being victims, sometimes they're being affected by what's going on in their peer group or watching the wrong stuff online or on TV. But sometimes they're imitating behavior that they've picked up from home. The way mom shrinks back, the mom curls into herself as a result of living with that violence, or the way dad bullies and they're watching the kids on the playground imitating that. So that's something to think about when you're looking at socially inappropriate behavior or worrisome behavior in a child. Children can get anxiety, children can get depression, children can get PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. And just think of it, if you're living in a home, if you're a grown-up, a woman, dealing with a husband who terrorizes you, wakes you up in the middle of the night to rant and rave, threatens to kill you, flings plates at you, He could be a doctor, a lawyer, an engineer, and still do those things. But if you're an adult, a woman, dealing with a husband like that, and terrified by that, think how much more terrifying it is for a child having to deal with that. And some people think, oh, the child is too young, or the child is sleeping, or they don't know. We argue after the lights go out. Not true. Children are very sensitive. When did they first start being affected by domestic violence? In the womb. All the cortisol running through a woman's veins when she's upset, those hormones, babies are very sensitive to it. So it begins from inception. That's why prevention is so important. If we can get out into the schools and start talking about what's a healthy relationship, what does that look like? I bet by the end of 8th grade, all the kids are going to know what's the major export of Bolivia. Well, that's important. What about knowing what a healthy relationship looks like? Isn't that a little bit more important? But where's the curriculum on that? Thank you. So Kaiser and the Center for Disease Control created this program, a study. Over 17,000 people they studied. They were coming to them for morbid obesity. They went on this program, they lost the weight, and they gained back even more. They thought, what is going on here? And then they found, as they dug a little deeper, that the highly significant number of the subjects in the study were dealing with past trauma, childhood trauma, watching their mothers be beaten, having witnessed other forms of trauma. And the more types of trauma you're exposed to, the higher your risk of developing all kinds of mental, emotional, physical health issues. It travels throughout your life. It impairs your ability to think. It causes physiologically measurable changes in the brain. It impairs your social, emotional, and cognitive development. It leads to getting into high-risk behaviors, ways to self-medicate, to sort of numb the pain, dull the pain of what you have to go home to and live with. They get into smoking, drinking, early sexual activity, anything to turn away from the pain that they're living with. And then later on, they are at higher risk for physical health diseases, everything from migraines, digestive disorders, to heart disease, diabetes. Several of the ladies of my group, they are dealing with cancer. There's no history of breast cancer in their family, but many diseases have a stress-related component to them. And how do you fight off stress from the inside when you're dealing with stress and attack from the outside on a daily basis? Stress takes a huge toll on your immune system. With enough of these risk factors and trauma, it can actually end up taking 20 years off your lifespan. That's why it's so important to address this at an early age. The impact on women as they deal with this: depression, anxiety, PTSD, eating disorders, health issues, and often they'll go to a doctor to get treated for these issues, and because doctors are not well trained in domestic violence either, they will end up treating the symptoms. You'll get a prescription for anxiety or depression. You'll get a weight loss plan without ever getting at the root cause of what caused those symptoms. So taking a minute to look at affluent abusers. They have the power, the money, the influence, the technical savvy, we'll talk about that in Silicon Valley, to make it very hard for a woman to leave safely, to get a fair settlement, or keep custody of her children. And power and control, that's the same across all income levels, but it's just the more money you have, the more power you have, the more tools you have at your disposal to use as weapons of power and control. We talked about some reasons why women don't leave. Many women, what they do is they sort of, and this is very understandable, sort of divide up the finances. How many ladies here are married to wonderful men? I hope you all are married to wonderful men. And what we do is, especially if you're working, or even if you're at home raising your kids, there's got to be a division of labor, right? When you get married, you're a team. So your husband may take care of the finances, you might take care of the meals, or however you want to divide it. But lots of women end up letting go control of the finances. It's just easier, especially if your husband is in, accounting, or he's a financial analyst or something like that. It makes it much easier for him to deal with the income tax return. With many of my ladies, they haven't seen an income tax return for years. Their husbands file online. Then the relationship ends and they find out that their husband hasn't paid income tax for the last 5 years. They can wake up to nasty surprises. Marriage is great as long as both partners are acting in good faith towards one another. Other reasons why it makes it hard for her to leave, being afraid she can't make it on her own, especially if her husband's been telling her for 20 years, you're stupid, you're an idiot, no one would ever hire you, nobody will want you, you'll be a bad lady if you ever leave me. When you're subjected to that kind of brainwashing over the space of years, it takes a toll on your self-esteem. And maybe she's been out of work, maybe she did stay at home to raise the kids, maybe partly too to act as a buffer, to be there for the children, knowing that she was in a difficult relationship and wanting to protect her children. Makes it hard to re-enter the workforce, especially in Silicon Valley, where the focus is so much on youth. And he may have given her many threats, stopping payment of the children's tuition if they're going to a nice school or to college. Lots of other threats. A common one I hear over and over again, I will destroy you. It's the language of war. And out in Silicon Valley, it's a very high-tech sort of competitive world out there. It's first to market wins, crush the competition, go, go, go. It's kind of, it's a very aggressive world out there. And sometimes what happens with affluent abusers is they take that same mentality and they bring it home. And then once the divorce starts to happen, they take that same mentality and put it into the legal arena. Women often get very isolated as a result of their abuser. Their husbands will make it hard for them to see their friends or family. And how do you compare your story? How do you know what normal is when you're losing touch with it? When your partner is telling you this is what normal is, getting up at 1 o'clock in the morning to make my dinner. In one of my groups there were 2 ladies, and one said, my husband, he comes in every night and he's pounding on the bed, ranting and raving at me for hours, and I still have to go to work the next morning. Another lady said, you mean that's not normal? Like this had become her new normal. This is what happens when you are a prisoner of war, when you get brainwashed. And I use that comparison very intentionally, because Judith Herman wrote a book called Trauma and Recovery. And she said that there are symptoms shared by captives, hostages, prisoners of war, and children and women who are exposed to domestic violence. And these symptoms are anxiety, depression, PTSD. The thing is, people think that it can never happen to them. Well, it's got to be, there must be something wrong with her, or why did she stay, or like it's her fault in some way. But domestic violence, getting involved with an abuser, can happen to anyone, because they often start out so charming, so smooth talking. Women often describe being swept off their feet. Oh, he bought me all these wonderful dinners. We went on trips together. He was so attentive to me. He was so charming, and that's who you fall in love with. And then what happens after a while? That other image is revealed. These are my clients here on the left. They're engineers, doctors, professors, lawyers, psychologists. I have ladies in every one of these categories. Their partners fall into every one of these categories. So I had a lady who said, the last time my husband tried to kill me, I called the police. He was flinging plates at her. He was chasing her with a knife. He was saying, I'm going to kill you. She picked up the phone, called the police. The police come. He gets to them outside the door before she does. And he says to them, thank God you're here. My wife is having another one of her psychotic meltdowns. Please help me. Please help her. Oh, I'm the psychologist. I really think she needs to be on a 5150. They rush in, they slap her in restraints because of course she's beside herself. She's hysterical. And guess what happens? She gets slapped in restraints and put on a 5150. This is how professionals use their credentials, their public image, their influence, their ability to turn from looking like they're going to kill you to, oh, please help me, I'm so glad you're here. They can turn it off in a dime. That's why they're so convincing, and why the average person can't believe they can be 2 opposite people. I said it could happen to anyone. It happened to this lady, Leslie Morgensteiner. Anybody read her book, Crazy Love? Yeah, she was a Harvard grad, a journalist with 17 magazine, best-selling author, wrote this book about being involved with an abuser. So just a regular mom, drove an SUV, you can watch her TED Talk, and it happened to her. Part of it, I blame Disney. We grew up with this notion, like how many grew up with the notion, oh yeah, Prince Charming, I just have to sweep these floors and for another 5 years and then I'm gonna go to a ball and meet Prince Charming and that's gonna be it, baby. Off to the castle, woo! Yes, now, to their credit, Disney is coming up with movies like Mulan and Frozen and Brave, and they're moving in the right direction. But we've got to do a lot of damage control, ladies, for the ones that grew up with Cinderella and Snow White, and you just go to sleep and wait for your prince, and then you go to a ball, and that night you meet the guy you're going to marry. And a lot of women have this image that, that they're going to work for a certain length of time, and they are going to meet the man of their dreams, and they do get swept off their feet, and he does take her off to his, lovely home. And then you see the other side. She marries Dr. Jekyll, and then she finds out he's also Mr. Hyde. I had a lady tell me that she grew up in, her grandmother grew up in Ireland. I'm Irish too, so I should have known this, but the grandpa was very abusive towards the grandma, and they would call, the grandma had a name for it, Street Angel House Devil. And I think that sums it up pretty well. Oh, sorry, I want to go back here. Just, so one of our homegrown success stories in San Jose, Jirbash Shalala was a very successful entrepreneur. He dropped out of school. Not bad for a high school dropout, 16 years old, created his own company and sold it for $300 million. Wrote a book, he's been on Oprah, shook hands with the president, he's been interviewed by Charlie Rose. He donated $35,000 to the Raphael House, which is a center that helps women fleeing domestic violence in San Francisco. And then we have one other fact about him. He was caught on tape beating his girlfriend 117 times. So, philanthropist, successful, handsome. On Oprah, before she found this out, she said all these great things about him. And he's single, ladies, very charming. Oh, but there's this other thing. You just dig a little deeper and you find out he's got this other side to him. The characteristics we've already talked about. Highly educated, professional, positive public image, involved in philanthropic work. But often they lack empathy, they lack remorse, they lack moral maturity, and they often claim their partner is crazy or incompetent. We talked about things like using the language of war and feeling like they're above the law. And there are types of abuse that they use that are emotional, financial, legal, technological. Emotional abuse, like criticizing her. Saying, you think you're really ready for that job promotion? Or do you really think you're going to abandon the children? Or you're cooking this again? It builds up slowly over time until it becomes these rants and raves in the middle of the night. I had one lady, as was asked by her lawyer, why she didn't let the lawyer press harder to get a fairer settlement for her. She was married to a doctor, and she said, well, the other night over dinner, my husband said to me, there's more than 40 ways to kill a woman and make it look like she died of natural causes. So she backed off very quickly after that. So I don't have to beat you directly. I can hit the wall beside you with the implication, first the wall, and next, if you don't watch your step, next it'll be you. But emotional abuse is the most damaging form of abuse. It's the one that can last a lifetime. It's the hardest one to recover from. So there are other types of abuse too. There's the financial abuse, where a partner will put his wife on a stipend, making her ask for money. He'll sometimes run up debts in her name, make it very hard for her to start over again when she goes out into the world and finds out that her credit rating sucks. There's technological abuse. In our advanced technological society, I can send you a text, you open it, and ever after that, I can get a clone copy of every text you get or receive. If you want to talk to me afterwards, I can tell you every place you've been. If you got an iPhone or an Android, I can tell you where you've been in the last month, and I know how long you've been there. Every place you've been and how long you've been. I can put a GPS device in your car and I can know where you've been. I can turn your phone into a monitoring device, a video camera, and know exactly what you're doing. I can remote control it. I can wipe it. There's tons and tons of things I can do. And when women go to the police, complain and think, oh, my every move is being legal abuse, where what happens to women when they go into the court system, the abuse gets transferred from home into the legal arena. So you see all the different types of abuse. It doesn't have to be physical or sexual to be abuse. It can be emotional, financial, legal, technological. So what we do at Women SV is we help women get educated about all these different types of abuse, and we help address them. We help them work around if they think that they're being followed. What are other ways they can do? They can get to a lawyer or get the information they need. Can they go to the library and do research online? Can they get a friend to drive them if they're going to go to a sensitive appointment? We can get them a prepaid phone to help them make calls without being traced. So we accompany clients to court. We accompany them to the attorney. We do all kinds of things to support women so that they don't have to fight their abuser alone. They've been alone for too long, and now it's time for them to reach out and get the help they need. And I'm hoping that you'll come up and talk to me afterwards about ways you can help our program. We are looking for all kinds of support. It's the support of organizations like yours that help us keep boots on the ground, keep hands reaching out to other hands who are looking for help for the first time in their lives, waking up to the notion that they've been victims of abuse, but they don't have to do it alone. With your help and with my help, they don't have to do it alone. So thank you so much.